Do any other products or companies come to mind, do you think, that are at that point where we talked about earlier, the conditions are met, like it's starting to get overcomplicated, the hatred's starting to build, it's a huge market, ones that you think are at risk?
I think Figma's at risk. So that's probably a hot take. But
this kind of brings up a question of what conditions have to be true for this strategy or playbook to work, because I, of course, have seen tons of angel investment pitches that essentially take the approach of, everybody hates X product and we're going to build, the quote unquote better version of it. And it's, it is kind of the simpler. But so for every linear that seems to be working, there's probably 1,000 examples where this playbook doesn't work. And so you two mentioned a couple of these conditions. One, which I really liked, which is you've got to attack a market where the lock-in is low or the switching costs are low to get any sort of traction. But I'm interested, what other conditions do you feel like have to be met for this to actually be a reasonable path?
So I said one, which is I actually think either switching costs need to be low. So there are either low network effects, low, lock-in, low data transfer problems, those kinds of things, or you need to be approaching a market that has this problem in a burning way. I think the other thing is it has to be a problem that really, really matters. This is one of the more important problems that a small set of developers have. A lot of it's X, but it doesn't suck, are often in things that are but that tool is good enough. So I think it has to be a hair on fire problem type thing would be another ingredient.
I would alter that a little bit, which is I was thinking the hatred has to be real, right? There's the incumbent product has to have hit a point of hatred for some subset of audience. There's some boiling point there. Certainly that level of despise for Jira existed among a sub audience, and I think if that isn't true, right, the X but it doesn't suck doesn't really work.
It's interesting because linear, superhuman, a couple of these it's X but it's really well designed don't actually have necessary, or Arc, the browser that we were just chatting about before we got started here, is really another interesting example where it doesn't have an obvious killer feature that makes it way better, but people still kind of love it. And I think it's because it's tightly designed in these nice little ways that fit a certain persona really well. So maybe that's another angle, which is something there's a sub persona that uses product X, doesn't super love it. And if you build specifically for them, so Superhuman built for CEOs and and VCs and really busy people who go through get a lot of inbound email, right? You can build something really awesome for them. That segment's too small for Gmail to care about. So I can really start to build for it. Then maybe you don't need killer features. You just need to but that needs to be a high value set of customers who probably also talk about the product a lot. You need a loud category. It can't just be quietly care about it. And this is the thing you see about these products is Arc, Linear, Superhuman, etc. The people who use them are really loud about them. They talk about them all the time.
I think they all also solve a irritating workflow. So the thing that people don't want to do is spend a lot of time slinging bugs in Jira or spend a lot of time sharing files in Sketch or figuring out how to get a process done in Workday. And so if you could streamline something that a person is spending a significant amount of their day on, which Superhuman does really well for email, and you can do it in a way that makes it feel really streamlined for them and feels like they get some time back to do the work that they really want to do, that really opens up the opportunity for disrupting some of these enterprise players, which are really solving for the enterprise buyer and not for the day-to-day workflows of the individual users that are using them.
Do any other products or companies come to mind, do you think, that are at that point where we talked about earlier, the conditions are met, it's starting to get overcomplicated, the hatred's starting to build, it's a huge market, ones that you think are at risk?
I think Figma's at risk. So that's probably a hot take. But
yeah,
I think what they've done with dev mode and what they've done in terms of the complexity of the design all makes a ton of sense. Like there's nothing out there that's like it. It's an incredibly useful design production tool. But it's kind of gotten away from its pick up and play dynamic that made it really easy for people to jump into the product and start to design, create different variations, and iterate towards something that they then wanted to harden into a production ready design. I think the antidote there might be FigJam. Like FigJam is a really nice pick up and play product. And so maybe the two of them work together. But for me, I feel like Figma's on this kind of precipice of they might be falling into the power user trap, and they're opening up an opportunity for a very lightweight, very fast collaborative design tool to come in for that front part of the design process, which is very conceptual and very iterative. And then Figma, I think, is just unrivaled in the back end of the design process, the production element.
Yeah. I will say, though, that the hatred is not there. It feels like the love is there still. Like we crushed on Figma in a previous episode, and it definitely seems like there. But I see the trajectory that you're trying to the possible trajectory that you're trying to paint. Yeah.
I hate to say this because I personally love the product and obviously spent a meaningful amount of my life helping build it. But I think the volume of like Slack as a problem, not a helper, has grown just sort of like steadily over time. And it's actually sort of like the opposite of the power user trap. It's almost like it's simplicity. It makes messaging so easy that like if you're a power user in a large company or a large organization, you're just like inundated with noise. It's the same exact problem email has. It is not unique to Slack. It is a problem of communication in a large node network. It's like messages increase with the square of the number of people in it. And so like, that's a lot of noise and a lot of problems. I think there may be some opportunity, like right now the network effects are so strong internally, it's the default, but it does start to feel like overload could be the thing and AI could be the things that like make it possible. But I think that one's tricky because I'm not sure that you can bottoms up disrupt with like small startups with it. It's like the problems are really acute in large, like when you have a lot of people talking. I don't know how you would execute that, but that's one that the tenor is shifting and it's been shifting for a long time, but it certainly seems louder and louder and louder around communication tools, in particular Slack.
Fareed, do you feel that's a problem with the product and the way it's evolved, or that's a problem with the way that people are using it?
Well, I think it's easy to say that it's a problem with the way people are using it. There's a whole lot of like right ways to use Slack. Like you shouldn't at everyone all the time. Like you should be able to ignore channels that aren't like relevant to you. It shouldn't be treated as a real-time communication and be more async. You should use threads. You should write longer form things. You should use search more effectively instead of asking the same questions over and over again. But the problem is those are all convention versus like product experience. And so it is very easy for it to get messy. Like one of the most common conversations in the ex-employee alumni Slack is, how do I help my company use Slack better? And it's like, it's just hard. Like every former employee turns into the Slack success manager over time at their new organization. That's not a scalable way to do that. So I think that there might be a world, the same way Linear is an opinionated product about a very specific set of workflows that allows that product to be way more successful for the people who share those opinions and way simpler. There may be a world where like a very opinionated versus open-ended, more horizontal communication tool could start to chip away at smaller subsets of the market where that version of how you want to communicate is better. I don't know what that looks like. I personally haven't designed the Slack killer. That is not something I've spent deep amounts of time thinking about, but I think it's certainly possible.
At Tinder, we designed a feature called Are You Sure, where it used AI to look at a message that a person was about to send and then analyze it and then ask them if it was going to be potentially illicit or offensive. Are you sure you want to send this? And that feels like a very viable feature for this new version of Slack.
Should build that, yeah. Yeah, in multiple directions, by the way. Maybe it would solve some HR issues in addition to the over communication problems. So,
how about you, Brian? What are like
I think it's the one we
workflows you
mentioned.
hate?
I think it's the one we mentioned earlier, Zoom. There's a few conditions that I see being met. So I don't think the hatred is there. I think that's the one that is there. But there's a few pieces of it. First is that they, as we talked about in the last episode, they are on a product velocity, there's like burning through things. They are adding so many products. They are adding so many features right now. And you combine that with their historical strength is not consumer grade user experience. Go into their admin controls and you will experience that yourself. And I think the combination of those two things, that velocity combined with not having that strength, probably leads to exactly what we're talking about. Now, the question is that and the other thing is like, I actually think there's a pretty low switching cost, and there's an opportunity for smaller remote companies now that don't have really large meetings where you run into all of those technical issues that require a lot of the depth in the complication and investment in technology that Zoom has made to make the video quality work at that large scale. So I do think there is like a market to go after there in addition to it. Now, it's not there yet, but it feels like once again that the ingredients are there to mix the power user trap stew, and it's heading in that direction. Now, the question though is that they are by far in the best on video quality, and that required a technology investment that they've been at for many, many years. And you would have thought that if there was somebody going to disrupt them, you might have seen it during the whole COVID tailwinds, but a lot of the new players that popped up during that time period haven't really done so well post-COVID. But I think the new thing that has emerged over the past 12 months is Zoom, in search of post-COVID growth, is on this product velocity, which seems like it's pointed at making the product pretty complicated and pretty cluttered. So I'm interested to see where that lands, even though we are avid users of Zoom and have been for many years inside Reforge.